Hello everyone. I'm Olivia, 31 years old. I want to tell you about a past that I kept hidden for many years because it was too traumatic and difficult to accept. There are things in life that we never imagined would happen to us, yet they still come and transform everything. I never thought I would have to live in agony because of a reality that, even today, I still find difficult to accept. My story is not about love or family pleasure, as people usually think, but about trade-offs and hidden emotions. Certain individuals say that love is the only valid reason for two people to get married. But in the situations of my mom and stepfather, I knew that was not true. From the very first moment he appeared, I sensed something was amiss. And at some point, I discovered that my mom was just an excuse. I was the reason why he married my mom. My mom, Diana, was the boss of a small fashion shop. After my dad passed away while I was a child, my mom nurtured me and took care of me until I was a grown-up. With her strength and dedication, my mom took care of our lives and turned her fashion shop into a place that so many people liked. My mom has always been an inspiration of determination and independence in my eyes. Life continued peacefully. My mom continued to work hard at the fashion shop while I concentrated on my education. As time went by, I went through a transitional chapter of my life when I joined the university. It was the first time I felt like I had completely escaped from my mom's protective embrace and walked out into the larger world. The initial weeks of university granted me many new things, and then one day I met Mr. Peter, who was not only my lecturer, but also my stepfather. Mr. Peter was a philosophy lecturer, and from my very first day of class, I became intrigued by the way he lectured. He not only helped me gain a deeper understanding of the topic, but also transformed the way I perceived life. Our after-class conversations became more regular, and through that, I realized that he was a man who had a significant impact on me. However, gradually, I began to sense something strange in his eyes as he gazed at me. Initially, I assumed it was just my imagination, but as time passed, the feeling got more and clearer. There were occasions when I was talking, and he stared at me not just like a lecturer to a student, but with a profound look, as if there was something he was not saying. That look contained an intimacy, a silence filled with deeper meanings, and I started to feel uncomfortable each moment that gaze appeared. I felt a bit confused. It was not a look I was used to, but a look that seemed to be exploring me, as if expecting something from me that I was unable to understand. I wondered whether I was thinking too much, but this strangeness could not be ignored. That feeling got more and more clear, and I could not ignore it any longer as time went on. Not just Mr. Peter's eyes, but I also started noticing weird actions from him. Each time I talked or just walked by, he would try to stand closer to me, sometimes laying his hand on my back in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. Those behaviors seemed innocent in the beginning, but to me they became heavy, causing me to feel uncomfortable. At some point, he kept me after class to talk about the lecture, but that conversation was not like previous times. He did not just talk about the subject, but appeared to intend to extend the pointless meeting. That inappropriate look and intimacy made me feel uncomfortable and suffocated. I no longer felt the respect and distance that should exist between lecturers and students. Over time, I did not dare to see him as often as before. I created all sorts of excuses to avoid private interactions after class. When he offered to help, I could only refuse with the excuse of having been busy, but in my heart, I only intended to keep my distance. I tried to take a seat further away in class, limited eye contact, and maybe even deliberately went to school late to avoid having to see him before class. I thought that if I avoided seeing Mr. Peter, things would be okay. If I didn't have to contend with those strange looks and actions, perhaps I would forget the worry that was growing inside me. For the rest of the school year, I tried to avoid meeting him again. When I kept my distance, things seemed to return to normal, and I thought the problem was solved. But I didn't expect that the safety I established for myself was just for a short time. After a year of school, when I came home, I realized that something was unusual about my mom. She was more joyful than normal. Her eyes lit up any time she talked, and occasionally she would laugh softly to herself, as if hiding an identifiable happiness. I began to wonder, but my mom just said that she was extremely happy because life was gradually getting better. Then one particular afternoon, when both mother and daughter were sitting in the family room, my mom suddenly sat down next to me, her face shining and her eyes sparkling with an unconcealed happiness. She started to share something important, that she had met somebody special, a person she intended to introduce to me. Looking at the happiness clearly in her every gesture, my heart was also delighted. For a long time, my mom had raised me alone, sacrificing her happiness to devote everything she had to taking care of me. I felt delighted that she ultimately found the pleasure and happiness she deserved. The day when my mom prepared to introduce that guy to me, I was really looking forward to it. The house was nicely arranged on that particular day. The dining table was expertly set by my mom, and I observed the excitement and joy in her eyes. In addition, I hoped this man would give my mom the peace of mind she had been seeking. When the doorbell rang, I felt my heart flutter. Mom immediately went to open the door while I was waiting in the family room, imagining the guy who would come into her life. As the door opened and I saw the guy who entered was Mr. Peter, my heart was pounding with an unspeakable shock. I stayed still, unable to believe my eyes. All the anxiety I had felt about him immediately came rushing back, surrounding me. The guy that my mom loved, the guy who she had introduced me to that level of trust and happiness, was the guy I had been trying to avoid all this time. A series of contradictory thoughts exploded in my head. Why him, of all men in the world? How did they know each other? Did he have any intentions? The anxiety in my heart rose drastically. All the memories of his weird stares and terrible gestures came flooding back, which made it impossible for me to think straight. All the problems I tried to escape were suddenly clearer than ever. I looked at my mom, hoping to find a sign that she noticed the strangeness of the situation, but she was absolutely oblivious. She kept smiling with affection, introducing Peter as if everything was fine. In my heart, this was just the debut of a guy she loved, without knowing that Peter's presence was causing turmoil in my heart. Mr. Peter stepped in, still smiling gently, looking friendly and nice. He greeted me, then pretended to be surprised, claiming that he didn't know me to be my mother's daughter. I tried to look surprised too, but inside I was in agony. My mom, innocent and unaware of what was happening in my mind, laughed and was glad to find out that Peter was my lecturer. The two of them joyfully chatted, talking about this incredible coincidence, while I just stood there, a feeling of discomfort clinging to me. I could not stop asking myself, who was Mr. Peter, and why did he come into my mom's life in a different position than what I knew him to be? Was this truly a coincidence, or was there something hidden that I couldn't see? From that moment on, things went on as normal. There were no unusual signs from Peter or something that made me worried. My mom and Peter became closer and closer. Their feelings were extremely natural. I noticed Mom was happier than ever. She smiled regularly and looked beautiful every day. Not long after, Mom decided to get married again, and Peter formally became my stepfather. Things went smoothly, nothing unusual occurred, and our family life continued peacefully. As time went on and there were no unusual signs, I started to feel that I was thinking too much. Perhaps my initial anxiety was due to the emotional strain of facing my mom's and my changed lives. Seeing my mom delighted every single day, I gradually let go of my concerns and anxieties. Seeing my mom smiling warmly with Peter, I knew that the most important thing was that she had found the joy that she deserved. At last, I accepted their relationship and gave them my blessing from the bottom of my heart. I prayed that my mom would continue to live in that happiness, and I also gradually accepted Peter as a part of our family. As time went by, I did not see any strange signs in Peter, as I had worried. Eventually, I blamed myself for thinking too much, allowing unfounded anxieties to affect me. Watching my mother constantly happy with Peter, I too felt relieved. Ultimately, I felt pleased for my mom and sincerely wished her the best, praying that her life would continue to be filled with happiness. At that moment, I thought that things would just go on peacefully. It had been quite a while without any unusual signs from Peter, and I gradually felt at peace. I was no longer concerned or doubted my stepfather, since he had always been a nice person, taking care of my mom and family. I honestly thought my earlier worries were just imagination and emotions. When I was 22, I graduated from university and began searching for my first employment. Even though I had not found suitable employment, I decided to help my mom at her fashion shop. We spent more time together, and Peter regularly stopped by the shop, assisting with small tasks when he had free time. Things were still going well, and I no longer had any worries about Peter. I sincerely believed he was a wonderful husband to my mom and was also a part of my life. But then, on the most terrible day of my life, everything changed. I was sick that day. The fever made my body exhausted, not enough to go to the shop with my mom like every day. My mom told me to remain home and relax, and I didn't think much of it. Only Peter, my stepfather, was home with me on that particular day because he didn't have to go out. Initially, I didn't worry or suspect anything. After all those periods of living together, I knew that he was a nice, decent person and loved my mother so much. I lay in my bedroom, trying to lull myself to sleep to forget the discomfort and fatigue triggered by the fever. But that tranquility did not last long. The thing I never imagined to happen happened on that particular day in the house that I had considered the safest place. Peter walked into my room carrying a glass of water and some pills. He said those were pain relievers to help my fever go down quicker. His voice was soft and nice. Absolutely nothing that made me suspicious. The fever had caused my head to spin, and I didn't think much of it. Just to get over it and rest, I took his pills and swallowed them without hesitation. I drank the water, not knowing that it was just the beginning of the most terrible thing that was about to happen. At that time, everything appeared normal, and I didn't notice anything different. After I finished drinking, I didn't feel anything strange. The pill did not seem to take effect instantly, and I was still fully conscious of my surroundings. I lay there quietly, hoping that the fever would shortly subside. But after about 20 minutes, things started to change. Peter came back to my room, this time without pills or water. The look in his eyes scared me, but when I tried to sit up, I couldn't move. The feeling of paralysis took over my body as if all my strength had been taken out. I panicked, trying to position myself to escape this weakness, but there was absolutely nothing I could have done but lie there, eyes wide open, as Peter moved closer. Peter came closer. His face appeared calm, but his eyes sparkled with something that sent a shiver down my spine. I struggled and tried to get up, but my body seemed totally paralyzed. Not even one finger could move. The helplessness scared me, but my fear increased even further as Peter leaned down, his face just slightly away from mine, and he smiled. His smile was no longer gentle and soft like before, but there was something dangerous and chilly. Then he whispered. His voice was soft but loud enough for me to hear him telling me that he has been waiting for that opportunity for a long time. I was shocked, not believing what I had just heard. My mind was whirling, trying to understand what was happening, but things appeared to fall apart at that moment. The anxieties and doubts from before suddenly became real, and I realized that the nightmare I had assumed was just an imagination turned into reality. Peter sat down beside me, his eyes filled with calculation and his smile scary. I just lay there helpless, unable to move or resist, just able to listen to his words. Each statement echoed clearly, eventually unveiling a horrific reality that I had never thought of. He started to explain that from the moment I entered university, he had feelings for me and was always hoping to be with me. He had tried every possibility to get closer to me, but he realized that I constantly kept my distance and did not allow him to get close. His efforts to reach me failed, and it was my rejection that pushed him to find another way to get deeper into my life. Peter started to learn about me, diving into my personal details and background at university. When he learned about my mom and my family's condition, he decided that the only way to be close to me was through her. He planned to get to know my mom better, gradually winning her trust. Everything appeared to happen effortlessly to him, and before I knew it, he ended up being my mother's husband, becoming a part of my family life. Hearing his explanations, I felt like I was sliding into a deep pit of sorrow. I could not believe that everything that transpired around me was actually planned. What I had thought was natural was my mother's happiness, but gradually turned out to be just a prank with the ultimate objective of getting close to me. I felt the worst agony and disgust when I discovered that from the start to the finish, everything was part of his plan. After he finished talking, Peter started to move closer, his eyes full of satisfaction as he watched me lying motionless on the bed. I was totally helpless as Peter approached. His eyes no longer contained any of the gentleness that my mom had seen. They were desperate and chilly. I struggled to shrink back, but I could not. Every movement appeared hopeless. My heart was beating in my chest, but my entire body felt like it was stuck, no longer obeying my decision. And then Peter leaned down, his hands moving over me, bringing with them a sensation of disgust that I couldn't ignore. He took charge and grabbed my body without mercy. I could only lie there motionless, feeling each moment he took me. The seconds felt like an eternity, and all I could do was wait for everything to end. But no, he did not stop. Everything around me seemed to fall apart. All the people I had now were torn away by him. I tried to fight back, but it was all fruitless. Peter didn't stop, and my body was no longer mine. Time appeared to drag forever, every passing second turning into a nightmare with no way out. I lay there paralyzed, staring at the ceiling, hoping to escape the truth, but everything continued happening gradually, painfully. The feeling of weakness, of losing control, made the anxiety in me grow with every second, every minute. Every action he took and every touch felt like a blow to my self-worth and decency. Pieces of me shattered without any capacity to stop it. I was entirely taken over by Peter. Everything happened so gradually I was just lying there, experiencing horror with no means to fight back. Every moment stretched for hours, and I was just hoping it all would end. When it was over, I lay there feeling depleted and useless. The room seemed chilly and suffocating. Peter stood up, positioning his clothes as if nothing happened, while I remained still, unable to escape the agony I had just encountered. I felt my whole world crumbling. Everything I believed in was now fading and useless. My mind was full of questions, filled with sorrow and hatred. I could not understand the reason why it had happened. How could someone whom my mom loved, someone I tried to accept as part of my family, do this to me? The agony, anxiety, and betrayal all combined, choking me and leaving me with nothing but helplessness and sorrow. Peter looked at me one last time, his eyes cold and heartless, then left my room, leaving me with all the pain, the misery, and the increasing obsession in my mind. I didn't know how to cope with this reality. I didn't know how to keep on living when everything appeared to have completely shattered. After some time, as the effects of the pill eventually wore off, I felt control gradually returning to my body. Still vulnerable and confused, I struggled to rise. Every movement was horrible, but I knew exactly what I had to do next. My hands were trembling as I struggled to straighten my clothes, hoping to hide the marks of the horror I had just suffered. I looked around the room, my eyes lingering on the phone on the table. It was the only means I had to ask for help to escape this nightmare. With a struggling step, I approached, my hands still trembling as I picked up the phone. I called 911, each number getting more difficult. When the operator's voice went through, I took some deep breaths, striving to keep my voice from cracking and letting it all out. The police came in a couple of seconds, but to me, the waiting time felt like forever. When they entered the house, the quiet was broken, voices shouted out, and at last, Peter was arrested. He didn't resist, only bowed his head quietly as the officers handcuffed him as if he were aware it was over. My mom came back shortly after the police arrested Peter. She saw me, still shivering and vulnerable, standing next to the police. In the beginning, she could not understand what was happening. I looked into my mom's eyes, and all my strength seemed to vanish. At that point, I could not hold it back anymore, with tears flowing down my face as I told her everything. My voice broke as I told her everything about Peter, about what he had done, and the agony I had been through. My mother was shocked, her eyes wide with uncertainty and pain. She didn't say anything the entire time I told her, but stood there as if her world had sunk. When the story ended, my mom collapsed, crying in total pain and regret. She blamed herself for not comprehending what was wrong and for introducing someone like Peter into our lives. In her tears, she just said one word over and over again, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." But I realized that no apology could ever get rid of the sorrow we were suffering. On that particular day, everything changed completely. My mom could never forgive herself, and I would never return to the way my life was before. After the police arrested Peter, I felt relieved, but the agony and damage did not go away fast. I had gotten justice for myself and had courageously faced what he had done. But that did not mean the nightmare would go away. My mom, after hearing the whole truth, fell into a profound state of guilt and regret. She could not stop blaming herself for welcoming Peter into our lives and not understanding his true nature. She decided to leave the house we shared and shut the fashion business for some time to find peace of mind. Peter was imprisoned, and I knew I would never see him again, but it was not enough to heal the scars in my heart. He had ruined my life, and regardless of how much time passed, the sorrow lingered like a wound that would never heal. From these horrible incidents, I learned that silence is never a remedy for pain or anxiety. Courageously facing reality, regardless of how painful it is the best way to find peace of mind. Silence and concealment will simply prolong the agony and eat away at you. I also realized that even if my mom did not know what had transpired, the trust that she invested in Peter and me had led to an unexpected outcome. Talking and expressing sentiments and thoughts with loved ones is very important. Perhaps I would have avoided this if I had spoken up when I thought Peter was wrong. Even though Peter was convicted and my mother realized her mistake, our lives have not come back to normal. I have to learn to live with the sorrow and nightmares of the past and find tranquility in wounds that are very difficult to heal. As for my mom, she also needs to learn to forgive herself. Everything is still going on, and I am not sure what will transpire in the future. But one thing I know for sure, I will not remain silent anymore. I will continue moving forward regardless of how challenging the journey is. The sorrow and pain will still torment me, but I understand that I have begun my journey of recovery, and even though the road is difficult and long, I will never again be a captive of silence. I will rediscover myself again and restore the strength that I lost in that experience.